your proud defender of the working class majority, Rick Smith.
Over the weekend, we launched a new radio program in the heart of New York City on radio station WBAI, and during the program, we got a call from a guy named Peter that stuck with me, and I've been thinking about it for the last day or so. He talked about how, thanks to his father's union, his father passed a couple of years back, but the father and mother lived on his pension while they were alive, while he was alive, and then when he passed, the pension went to his mother, and his mother was able to live several good years and get through some very hairy times because of the father's union pension. And it got me thinking, and one of the things I talked about was the concept of the three-legged stool that my grandparents' generation constructed. This idea that you have a defined benefit pension plan, you spend time at work, you get a defined benefit pension plan, you save some money because throughout your work years you squirrel a little bit away, good thing. And the other leg was the Social Security. So you put a little bit of money in a coffee can, put it aside. You got the work that you had done for the mass of your life, funding a little bit of your golden years, and of course Social Security. And I said, over the weekend that sadly, during my lifetime, that three-legged stool has been whittled down to a stick that we're really just getting beaten with. It's not even like there's retirement security going to be possible for the mass of people coming, in the next 30, 40 years. This idea that you're going to be able to retire and not have to work and live with some measure of dignity and respect for the mass of the working class is going to be non-existent, because the reality is that defined benefit pension, that defined pension fund that was so common during my grandparents' era, is virtually non-existent. There are a handful of places where it's still there, mostly union funds, mostly building trades funds. There's still that defined benefit that when you retire, you're going to get X amount of dollars per month until you die. And you add that with your Social Security and your savings, and you're going to do okay. But for the mass of people, they've been saddled with these crummy 401ks. And it got me thinking about, that three-legged stool. Because, there's no more defined benefit pension. Everyone's got a 401k. And if you look at some of the numbers that are out there, the average 401k in the country is like 18 grand. Some really ridiculous number like that, which means there are a handful of people who have enormous sums in their 401ks. And then the mass of people who have nothing. Because wages haven't kept up with inflation. People are struggling to make ends meet. So there's no savings happening. We're going to put money into a 401k and then we're going to save in the tin can. That isn't happening. And what the weird thing is, and I had this conversation today because I was explaining what a defined benefit pension fund was to somebody, because most people don't get it. The defined benefit pension was something that was funded by the employer. It was part of your compensation. So when you made your, 10, 15, 20 bucks an hour, they put extra money into a pension fund that was specifically for you. And every year of service that you worked for that company, you got a little bit more. And as I was explaining to this person, the pension fund that they were getting into, if they worked 10 years, they would get $145 a year for those 10 years. It'd be $1,450 in retirement. You work 30 years, it's 3 times that. It's $145 per year of service when you get to a certain age. You combine that with your Social Security, combine that with your savings, you're going to do really well. Sad reality, as I said, people with the 401ks, nothing there. Because most of the time, employers will only match when you put money in. And if you can't afford to put it in, they get off scot-free. And then, when did you put money aside? So we're heading into a time where Social Security is the main bit of retirement. And understand, Social Security was never meant to be a retirement program. It was an anti-poverty program. It said, this is the line. We're going to make sure that Granny doesn't have to eat cat food and live on the street in a cardboard box. We're going to set the line here so you can have a bare minimum standard of living. The other things, the savings and the defined benefit pension, that was to give you a livelihood, to give you a life. And those have been eviscerated. And now that one last stick, Social Security, there are those who just want to bludgeon us with that. And there are people who believe that it's not going to be around because we haven't done anything to shore it up yet. We haven't done the things that needed to be done, like scrapping the cap. We haven't done any of those things yet. So in, not the too distant future, they're saying potentially it could pay, 3/4 of what it's supposed to pay, which means, again, that defined benefit pension's gone for most people. The savings didn't happen. And now that anti-poverty program that was supposed to keep you right at that line is going to get whacked. All because the wealthy in this country have said, no, we want more. We want more. There was an interesting op-ed in I think it was the New York Times this weekend, that pointed out that the richest 10% of households in this country own 80% of all the wealth. That means if you have 10 people in a room, one guy owns 80% of all the wealth. Everybody else is fighting over the other 20%. In fact, the top 1% of households in this country own 16 times that of the bottom half, the entire half of the country. Just that top 1%. They pointed out that in this country, there's a combined wealth of all the households in the country, combined wealth of what this nation is worth of almost $130 trillion in the first quarter of this year. And they point out that the wealthiest 1%, they own over 32% of it. That is up from 23.4% back in 1989. And again, you can look at 1989 as that moment where Reaganomics really took hold, the massive tax breaks that we handed out to the wealthy, where we dropped the top marginal tax rate from 70% down to 28%. This is how the wealthy have created just in unimaginable amounts of wealth, and how they've pocketed for themselves. And yet we can't seem to get on the same page of going, we do need to tax the rich. In fact, there was a study done back in 2018. The Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development Group, the OECD group, they found that 28 countries in that group, 10% of the households owned 52% of the wealth. The bottom 60% owned 12% of the wealth in those 28 countries. In the U.S., and we're the outlier here, in the U.S., the top 10% held 79.5%, almost 80% of all the wealth. The bottom 60% owned 2.4%. So you go, are wealthy doing much better than the other advanced countries by a lot, and our poor doing much worse. Our working poor. And why is that? I go back to the fact that we've allowed unions to get broken up. We've allowed ourselves to be pitted against each other. And we've allowed the very wealthy to pull the strings of our politics to ensure that more for them and the hell with the rest of us. And this is not new. There's no surprise here. The thing that I think is positive that's happening is people are waking up to this. Peter calling and saying, look, I now get it. I now recognize why my father went to all of these workplaces and saying, hey, you got a union card? I now get why he was so adamant in saying, no, you have to get a union job. He was clear. He's going, I finally figured it out. I wondered why all these years, why that was so important. Now I know. And what I'm hoping is that there'll be this epiphany of working people going, now I get it. Now I get why the employer is so anti-union. Now I get why Amazon spent $200 million to fight back one little campaign in Bessemer, Alabama, a right-to-work state that they could have easily allowed in and divided and ended up decertifying in a year anyway. But it's all about the power and control, which is why I'm thrilled to see in this moment, we're seeing a lot of work actions, a lot of strikes going on. People are finally saying enough is enough. And it's coming down to the fact that the pandemic has highlighted the fact that pays low and working conditions are horrible. Over the weekend, I talked about the Frito-Lay strike in Topeka, Kansas. You got 600 workers on strike. They've been on strike for, I guess, a couple weeks now, a week and a half. Why'd they go on strike? They were working 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, every day. Some of the people not having days off for months and not having a choice. Being forced to work from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and then having to get back up and get back to work at 3 a.m. then the next day. It's crazy. And they're finally saying, had enough. And I'm hoping that we as voters stop with the political divide. Stop with the here's some red meat, fight over this. Here's one cookie for you. I'm going to take the bag. You can fight over this one. And I look at the story over the weekend. This company, Huffcore, they're the people who make those. Have you ever been to like a hotel ballroom and those partitions that go between the big room? So they take the gigantic room and they break it down into small little rooms with these accordion-like partitions that they can move along tracks. Well, they make that stuff. This company has been in business 120 years. A family-owned business in Janesville, Wisconsin, 120 years. They get bought up not too long ago by this Open Gate Capital, one of these hedge funds. And thank goodness for the pandemic. But Huffco is now Huffcore is now announced it's coming. They're moving to Mexico. So they don't have to pay the $20.90 an hour that they're paying their workforce and providing the health care that they're providing for their workforce. No, now they can pay a fifth of that to the workers in Monterrey, Mexico. And the union leadership said, it's not really surprising. You knew this is their MO. This is what they do. This is who they are. And you go back, throughout the years they've done this. In 2013. They closed down the Golden Guernsey Dairy there in Waukesha, Wisconsin. No notice, 100 people out in the street. 2014, Fusion Paper in Connecticut. They shut them down after getting a 10-year loan from the state and signing a 6-year union contract. They just up and shut down. Also in 2015, they, without any notice whatsoever, they shut down the Penny Saver paper in California, 678 people to the curb. Because, hey, it's good for business. It's how we're saving the company. And in fact, that's basically what they said in their statement. Their statement was, their defense was, they blamed the pandemic for one. But in their statement, they said, they made a difficult decision. It wasn't a difficult decision. They knew exactly what they were doing when they bought that company. But they went on to say that Huffcore is suffering significant negative economic effects related to COVID-19 pandemic. I want to know if they took PPP money. They said when considering these impacts and Huffcore's aging manufacturing facility in Janesville, the future of the entire business is in jeopardy. Therefore, to ensure Huffcore's survival and long-term viability, the difficult decision was made to relocate to an alternative facility. Yeah, they're moving to Mexico to run away from paying people decent wages. They're running away to be able to exploit labor, to exploit the environment, and take advantage of all of the money they can probably get there. And screw their workers. And I go back to, is this what we want from companies? This was for 120 years, a good family-run business that provided good jobs to families, a good solid sustaining wage with health care and retirement security. And now just like that, they're going to rip it out from under these people and take it somewhere else. Why? So the wealthy can put more money in their pocket, so they can have more in their hedge fund. And that 1%, maybe they get to 81%. Maybe they get to 82%. It's criminal, I tell you, which is why we need to have some serious tax changes in this country. Going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around.
There's nothing more American than workers standing up.